Thank you, Ruben. I appreciate that. In the interest of brevity, for top hydraulic cylinders, I'm going to say one thing. And basically, I don't necessarily buy into the notion of replacing them all when one goes bad. What I do, since I do it myself, is replace all the ones that require the same interference removal, because I'm very reluctant to take apart interior or plastic components on these older cars, because there's always a pretty good chance of breaking something you can't replace. So I've got an article on that. If y'all want to see my full thoughts on that and diagnosis of it, send me an email and I'll send you the article. But I'd like to get to some of the questions that we had submitted and to some that have been coming up. We have one question that was asked by a couple of people that had to do with getting new key fobs for a 129, especially the ones that need the electronic signal to start. And one of the questions was, gee, I've been told that my 1997 key fob is not available, but all the others are. And the others was, how about my 1999 key fob? Does anybody have the answer to the key fobs other than they're not available? Not exactly jumping. I even brought some key fobs in today, but I don't think there's a good answer to this one. In the text, I've heard none are available, but MBCA is working on it. Well, I saw a text where 272 were suddenly available and immediately sold out. But so that's one to watch the internet chat rooms and see what can come up, because I would certainly like to get some more myself, but it does not look really good. We had one other question for Bill Kraling, and I think Bill's in the conference call today. He may want to elaborate, but his car, it's an SL500. It's, I think, an earlier one. Car intermittently quits while driving, takes a few minutes to restart, and adding heat fuel system treatment to the tank seems to clear the problem up. He thinks it's water in the tank. Any other thoughts on that? And Bill, do you want to elaborate on that at all?
Yes, I'm not sure how to do that.
Go ahead, Bill.
Okay. Problem I had was intermittent stall outs while driving the car cruising. And it happened quite often, about every other time I took the car out. And once it stalled, it would have to sit for maybe 1 or 2 minutes, and then it would start right back up again and perform quite well. All other times it performed well. I started adding heat fuel conditioner to the car, and I went the next 1,100 miles and never had a failure. But however, a couple weeks ago, I filled the tank with new gas and I had one failure and haven't had one since. I'm still hanging on to the bad gas theory, because maybe when I filled the car up, I stirred up some residue or something off the bottom of the tank. My plan now is to keep driving it and hopefully not have many stalls. Whenever it's time to fill it again, I'm going to get the tank drained. So that's all I have.
Okay, so anyone want to offer some answers to Bill's dilemma?
Hey, Bill, this is Steve Kendrick. Is that on a R107 or R129?
129.
R129, 1996.
I have a 75 450 SL on the R107, and I had intermittent shutdown of the engine driving down the road. I ended up replacing the fuel pump.
Yeah, my fuel pump's been replaced already, and so has the position crank sensor, which is another culprit that I found on the internet a lot of people had trouble with.
Yeah, Tom Scherer mentions that it could also be the ignition module.
Okay, I have not touched that.
Yeah, it would be useful. I might carry a timing light in the car with me, and when it happens, hook the timing light up to one of the cylinders and crank the car and see if you have spark or not.
Excellent suggestion.
Yeah, just went through an issue like that with my 928, which is just a real pain to figure out. You really want it to not be intermittent.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm hoping. If it's not fixed, I hope it breaks completely.
Okay. All right. And we had a note from Frank Irwin. I think he may have already fixed this one. He says top did not completely shut. It stops as it's almost shut. And this was a 129 question. And he has diagnosed it down to the magnetic switch at the top of the windshield. Frank, did you want any more information on that one? Okay. Anyway, so that was the prepared questions, and now a kind of open forum on what people want to ask or talk about. This would work best if you either put it in chat or do a raise hand, so we don't have 140 people talking at once. But we can continue. There's no cutoff on the Zoom BTC. We can continue as long as we want. Whatever you feel. And I'll raise your hand. Oh, Eric Black's raised his hand. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, so I've got a question about the air conditioning unit. My air conditioner doesn't work. It's a 91, and it's set up for, what is it, R12, the old Freon system. And I was planning on doing a complete rebuild, just pulling the whole thing out and putting all new parts in for a more modern version that'll work with R134. I've done this on other cars before, and that seems to work very well. When you put a whole new air conditioning system in, you basically get a whole new air conditioning system, and it works like a new car. And you're going to have to replace, if you're going to do the conversion from R12 to 134A, you're going to have to replace all the O-rings anyway. But my question is, how difficult is it to pull the HVAC unit out from behind the dash? I know I've done this on other cars, and it's a real pain in the ass. And I got all hopeful when I saw how easy it was to get at the blower motor. Has anybody done this this job of replacing the evaporator core?
I think that's a Danny Brewer question.
I could definitely answer that question. That was my main function at the dealer, and another independent shop was the evaporators on these cars. And somebody had mentioned earlier, and I think it might have been you, Gary, it's a time-consuming job. It's definitely doable. The issue is with the aging of our cars, all the plastic components that are going to fail just trying to replace something. If you don't have an evaporator issue on that car, which by now I think most of them probably have already been replaced because we did have a problem with them in the Southeast. I wouldn't go in and replace the evaporator. That's the only component behind the dash that would be affected if it doesn't have a leak, because you can still do the expansion valve and all from the external underneath the hood. I think I like the idea of, if you were going to restore a car, to put a whole new system in, but there's a way to function check and find out what the actual culprit is. I'm sure there's better places to spend money than just replacing the whole system, but I mean, that's definitely his prerogative. I just don't see that that's a feasible option. I wouldn't pull the dash out if I didn't have to, especially on this car.
Yeah, I mean, I would diagnose the system and see what's wrong with it, draw a vacuum on it, see if it's tight, and go from there instead of.
It's not tight. We've already discovered it's not tight.
Well, yeah. I've had to replace a compressor in a line. And on an SL500, one of the most expensive AC components is the line out of the compressor, which was just shocking to me. But yeah. I had mine rebuilt at a place in Texas to replicate the original form and function of the line. But man, buying that thing new, it's like an $800 part, which seems absurd. Anybody else have comments on that question? Okay, Robert Schober has a question. Go ahead, Robert. Robert. Okay, I see your hand up, Robert.
Okay, if you're on a computer, you can hit the space bar. That'll unmute you real quick.
Okay, there. Am I on?
Yep, we hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to suggest that on a website, Mercedes Source has a great deal of information on the R107. It's a really good resource.
Yeah, that's Phil Bergsma. I love his website.
Yes.
I buy some of his products. The book that I got, Avoiding Catastrophic Destruction in Your V8 Engine, was the one that gave me the guidance on what I did on my 450 SL. So he's got
very
great
good.
stuff. Yeah. I saw a question go by in the text that I wanted to ask. Let me find it again. Shoot, where'd it go? What was it? Wait. I lost it. What was that really good question that was in there? It went away. Oh, trying to find it. I lost it. Interesting. Okay. Anybody else have a question they want to ask about or talk about? Okay, there's one 1982 380 SL. My compressor is shot. Options. And I think you can buy the compressor, but maybe that's naive of me. Any other comments on that?
Those compressors were GM compressors. Actually, they built them upside down. So you have to be careful when buying. I'm not sure if he's talking about the big round one or the small cylindrical one, but you got to be careful of buying the GM compressors that go in there as a replacement, because they actually built them upside down for the Mercedes, and the oiling system inside of them won't function correctly if you just bolt the GM one on there. Just as a side note, if someone's looking on the internet.
Okay, I've got a question here from Frank Irwin. When my AC is on, cool air comes out of it moved, center vents, but warm air out of the outer vents. I think that's a duct controller issue, but someone else smarter than me might want to answer that one. It was cool air.
Trying to give everybody a chance to chime in on this, but
we had that
ideally it could
problem.
be.
We had that problem, Gary, and we recharged the air conditioner on the ML350.
Yeah, but I think
Remember we had uneven cooling.
Yeah, but I think it's a duct issue on the 107. Danny, what were you going to say?
That's a vacuum operated system as well. Well, kind of a vacuum operated system. So yes, you have some inputs that are telling that system to supply vacuum one way or the other. So more than likely, the proper way to diagnose that would be to get underneath the passenger side under dash, and you can pull vacuum from the vacuum block and find out which servo may not be functioning correctly, but it is probably a vacuum issue on that car. Okay.
And I found the question that I had seen go by. I wanted to address to the audience. And it was owner's manual. This is a 86560 SL, but it's common to all the cars. Owner's manual says to replace airbags at a certain periodicity. And the question was, are they available? The other part of the question is, do you really need to do that? And I'll offer you my experience with the 94 SL500, which had the original airbags. And my wife had the misfortune to run it into a tree at about 50 miles an hour. And all the airbags went off like they're supposed to, even though they were the original airbags. So, my sense of that is, maybe you don't really have to replace the airbags. But anybody else want to chime in on that one?
Yeah, I got a little bit, just out of curiosity, because if you look on the SLs on the door panel, it'll have a date on there. Originally, Mercedes had a date when they said those needed to be replaced. And then over a period of time, through them being in the field, they determined that they had a much longer lifetime than what they originally had put on there. So I don't know how long they actually would last, but that was kind of where that came from. So, but if you look on your door seal or door panel or whatever frame, you'll see a little sticker, and it'll have a date on it when the airbag was originally supposed to have been replaced.
Usually about 10 years, but I've seen cars that were in collisions a few years ago, and that's they're almost 35 years old, and the airbags were still in good condition. So.
Right. I found an article somewhere where it actually talked about them testing it and then making the determination that they didn't need to be replaced.
Yes.
I don't remember where I saw that.
Okay, good. Thank you for that.
And I guess in all actuality, you don't want to not drive your car if you can't find an airbag to replace them with. I mean, you should, keep in mind there's the chance that they might not deploy, but you wouldn't want to not drive your vehicle if you couldn't find a door airbag to replace it just due to time, in my opinion.
Yeah, and they tend to work. So, Okay. Some more discussion on the warm air in some vents and cool air in the other. The thing that Joe is referring to was an issue where he had low refrigerant charge in his system. And so I think as it went across the evaporator, some parts of the evaporator were colder and some parts of the evaporator were warmer. And I think that's why he was seeing that. And we recharged his system and it fixed that problem. That was a 2013 ML350. But, you know, for a 107, I think it's probably more likely that you have one of the, you know, the vent controller, the vacuum controlled vent duct movers, as Danny said. But you know, anytime you touch an air conditioning system, you probably just ought to put a set of gauges on it and see what the charge is to you know, give you a knowledge of where you really are and whether you have to do that. Because very often the charge is low and you put the right amount of charge in it and it works right. Okay, let's see any other questions here. Okay, hydraulic tops. Elaborate on hydraulic tops. Okay. You know, there are people that don't get an R129 because it's got a hydraulically operated top. And there's people that I know that don't operate their tops and leave the hard top on all the time because they're afraid of the hydraulic cylinders going bad. You know, hydraulic cylinders is just not the end of the world. They're within the capability of a do-it-yourselfer. They're not that expensive if you send them off to Top Hydraulics and have them rebuilt. And you know, they don't even all fail at the same rate. You know, I think I've done 13 hydraulic cylinders in the last couple of years, and there's some I've never done. I've never done it to no lift cylinder. I've never done it to no lock cylinder. I've done a number of windshield cylinders on 129, main cylinders, bow retraction cylinders, which seem to go bad, and oh, by the way, are the hardest ones. So of course you have to change them. But so I don't buy into the replace them all when one goes bad, unless one, you have a lot of money, and two, downtime on the car is your biggest concern. Because if that's your biggest concern, go get them all done at the same time. But you know, I will normally replace the ones that leak and everything else I have that I can get to with that degree of interference removal. Periodic. Anyone have periodic transmission fluid leaking when R107 is stored for winter and cold weather? I have a 560 SL 1987 that's done this the last 2 winters since I bought it. Anybody want to address
Yes.
that one?
Mine always does that.
Okay.
If you park it for more than 6 weeks, it leaks transmission fluid, but as soon as you drive it, it stops leaking.
Well, my 928 does that. And of course, the 928 has a 722.3 Mercedes transmission in it. So very similar. And here's what's going on. The transmission has a bunch of fluid sitting up in the torque converter. And as it sits for a long period of time, the transmission fluid in the torque converter drains down out of the torque converter into the sump in the transmission. And so the level in the sump gets higher and higher. And sooner or later, it's getting to a leak that isn't normally exposed and only is leaking out from basically gravity head of the fluid. And you know, if you started the car every month, it wouldn't do that. But basically, there's a leak someplace in the transmission that's higher up than the normal level of the transmission fluid. And there are a few places in those transmissions that can do that. There's a B1 piston, a B2 piston, there's a dipstick penetration is probably below the level. But you know, the thing to do if you really want to attack that problem is put the car up on a lift or up so you can get under it and just sit and wait till it does it and see where it's coming out and then address that issue. And I just did that in my 928 and it was the B1 piston, I think. Boy, that's hard to do. I mean, you really can't do that one very well with the engine with it in the car. But you know, that's what it is. I can't tell you where it is. Okay, other questions. Yeah, let's see. A few more questions. There's a pump that have too much rubber washers that might fail. Well, the transmission pump on the 722.3 transmission is accessible from the front. It's got to come out of the car to do that. Oh, top hydraulics. I have a dismantled A124 top hydraulics, and it took a month, including Klaus rebuild in Oregon. My turnaround for the ones that I didn't order in advance on hydraulic cylinders has been about 10 days, doing priority mail each way. What I usually do when I do top hydraulic cylinders is I figure out which ones I'm going to need, and I order them in advance so I have them in my hand, and then I do them all in one day. The advantage of that is less downtime on the car, and it's fresh in your mind what you did to take apart the car to get them done. You can't do that on all cylinders, though. He wasn't able to offer that on a 124 convertible main hoop cylinder. I had to wait on that one. Okay, reading some more questions. Okay. New keys cut. There've been a couple of keys cut questions, and generally on keys, if you're not talking about 129, expensive and hard to find key fobs, the older cars, the dealer should just be able to order you a key that's already cut for the car with VIN and proof of ownership in a few days, and it's like $25 a key. You can also buy blanks for the older cars and have them cut in an old style hardware store too.
Yeah, this is Dean. Throw something out on a key on my 77 300D. This was like 2 years ago. Wanted a new key because my keys were wearing down so bad, and the Classic Center had a key cut for me and mailed, and it took maybe 10 days or something. And they looked it up by the VIN and cut it at the factory or whatever, and then shipped it to me, and it was a perfect key.
Yeah, and I've got a couple from the dealer that way. My 500E, when I bought it, only had one key, and that wasn't very good, so I was able to get one pretty quickly from them. And my 300CE coupe, I was able to get.
Yeah, let me throw a couple other things out. I was looking because we had tried to buy a key with the car, or for the car, the SL, and I contacted the Classic Center about it because it didn't come with the two standard keys, just with the 2 key fobs, because originally they came with 4 keys. And come to learn, I was trying to find my notes and I couldn't, but there were actually 3 series of cars where they're not available or weren't available. I want to say it was one of the S series, large sedans, MLs, and then the SLs, and they were all kind of different years, but kind of in that same time period. And what the guy told me was that the factory that made the actual keys themselves went out of business, and they weren't able to purchase the right to make the key, and that's what they were working on. So, but I think it's not the fob itself; it's the actual key, and I think inside the key is the part that has the chip that communicates with the ignition system.
Yep.
If you look at that key, it's laminated.
Mm-hmm.
The actual physical metal key is laminated because the 2 keys that come with it also operate the car, and they're not fobs. And I think it's what's inside between the 2 pieces that they're having a problem getting.
Any of those keys that have the flip out metal portion, there is a small microchip mounted inside that plastic housing. So I always tell everybody, whatever you do, if your housings break or the mechanism doesn't properly function anymore, to save those housings, because we can always remove that chip and put it in an older housing, and also put your metal key fob. We can change your metal key fob over, not anyone can actually do it. But there's a small microchip, and it's actually in that metal housing. So any of your Mickey Mouse keys or your wallet keys will have that microchip built in or laminated it in. But the flip keys, like the switchblades, are actually in the plastic housing, can be removed from one to the other. Just a FYI. I'm going to go ahead and clock out now. If anybody needs me, they can always email me, and I'll try my best to answer any questions that anybody may have. But I had a great one, and hope everybody has a great day, and remember to wash your hands.
Okay. Thanks, Danny. We appreciate your coming.
Yes,
and
sir.
We appreciate your sponsorship.
Yes, sir. You bet you.
Okay. Anybody else got anything?
Gary, we got some hands up. I'm not sure if they've all been addressed. We've
Oh,
got
okay.
G
Uh,
Black.
Mr. G Black, I see your hand up. What you got?
I've got an 84 380 SL, and for whatever reason, when I first start the car, the power windows will not go down. It has like a 2-minute hesitation, and then they work and function properly. What's the issue there?
Wow, anybody got a thought on that one? I have never heard of that. I would go look at the fuses and see if you've got copper centered fuses or if you've got those silver centered fuses. And I think I'd probably replace all the silver centered fuses with the copper centered fuses and make sure that all the fuses have good contact. But that car does not have a computer controlling that. So I suspect it must be some type of bad connection someplace.
You might
How old
have
is your battery?
Pardon?
How old is your battery?
And that car is about 1 year, year and a half.
That shouldn't be your battery, but if you got low voltage going there, your alternator is going to kick the voltage up, and then your windows are going to work.
You might have poor contact within your window switches.
Okay, yeah, that's what's strange. It only does it when I first initially start the car, but after I drive the car, say, for 3-4 hours, they work properly each and every time, only on the initial startup. That's why I'm so confused with this.
Yeah, that battery comment is a really good one on that though too, because if your battery, even if it's only a year old, if your battery is low, it's taking a little bit for the alternator to charge the battery up, and it may be too low a voltage to operate. Does anything else in the car operate weird for the first 2 minutes?
Nope, everything else works perfect, just like it should. Could it possibly be an alternator or a voltage regulator type issue on the initial startup?
Sure, it could certainly be that, although I think you'd see something else weird, like the radio not working right or something like that, or the antenna not going up. But you can certainly easily check that by just taking a look at what your voltage is when you first start.
Okay, thank you.
Gary, if you have some corrosion on your battery post, that can cause low voltage going to the car or going to that unit.
Yeah, bad connection someplace in that system, from battery to fuses to, as Ruben said, switch is the first thing that kind of comes into my mind. But that low voltage from the battery thing is really kind of an interesting thought. Okay, Mike Partain has a question.
There's a little device now that's on the market, costs about $30, $35, that you can connect to your battery, and it'll talk to your phone, and you can monitor all the battery functions. And you'll see whether or not it's what the starting voltage is, what the drop-in starting voltage is. It'll plot that, and it'll give you, when the alternator comes on, comes up, power is on. It's very useful.
Hey, thanks, Joe. That was our Peachtree president.
Very relatively inexpensive.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Mike Partain has a question. What's up, Mike?
Hi, guys. Yeah, first of all, say hello to all my Peachtree section friends from the coast over here. But on my 380, cold start is fine. And I do have, like Diana was talking about, the rattle, the tap, tap, tap until the oil pressure builds up. But hot starting, it just runs and runs and runs like it's not getting any fuel. Is that the classic vapor lock on that 380, 83 380?
Probably. I mean, my 73 450 SL has a different system, but I had to research hot restart, and you tend to see a lot of comments on the internet about hot restart on those issues. Yours is a CIS, electronically modified CIS car, but it might very well be. Make sure you have summer fuel for one. The other is, the CIS system, you diagnose it by putting pressure gauges on it and see how it holds pressure. And the system ought to hold pressure. You might have the pressure being lost, and the fuel pump has to build back up the pressure. And that can be caused by any of the injectors leaking, the cold start valve leaking. I think your car has a warm-up regulator. Warm-up regulator being bad can cause that problem. That system uses the fuel pressure to regulate what the mixture is, and if the warm-up regulator isn't functioning properly, it won't allow you to warm start properly. So lot of little issues with the CIS system, and you need a person that understands the CIS systems to troubleshoot that one. But a set of gauges and seeing what the fuel pressure is under that condition was probably the first thing to tell you, but it could very well be vapor lock.
That's why they put the air conditioner coil on the fuel line, I guess, right?
Well, that I think that's an efficiency thing. You know, because the 107, late 107s have that, 129s have it, basically 124s have it. You know, I've got a car that has that injection system that I ended up driving about 4 hours in 100-degree traffic, and then ended up in a traffic jam, and the car just wouldn't run. And that was vapor lock. I thought it was something else, but it was vapor lock.
Wow. Okay. Well, thanks for that heads up.
Okay. Now we have another Brett Jurek. We have his question.
Hey, yeah, I've got a 87 560 SL, and I wanted to let everybody know of a repair that I did recently that was saved me thousands. You know, a lot of times the car will not shift into fourth gear, and you get stuck in third, so it just won't get into fourth gear, and a lot of people go and replace a transmission when that happens. However, I watched on Mercedes Source, and he didn't tell what to do, but he said start looking at simple things first. What it turned out to be, underneath the gas pedal on the 107 is a kick-down switch, and that switch causes the car to downshift when you floor it. Well, what I did is I unplugged the kick-down switch. All of a sudden, I got fourth gear back. The kick-down switch was stuck in an engaged position so that it was always trying to downshift and would never go into fourth gear. And on that car, what that does is on the highway, if you're going 70 miles an hour, it will cause you'll be at about 4,500 RPMs, which will cause you to overheat at that speed, because that car just it won't cool enough at that high RPMs for an extended period of time on a hot day. Because this was in the summer, it was 90 some degrees outside, and we live in Dallas, so it gets hot in the summer. But I replaced that switch, and I actually went to Mercedes-Benz of Plano, which is our local dealer, and was able to get the part with one day notice from them, and it was only $22. So I unplugged it, everything worked fine. I put in the new one, it still works fine. So if you have a transmission that's not shifting into fourth gear, try the kick-down switch under the gas pedal, and you will probably find that is your problem. So I wanted to share that with the group. And I want to thank you guys for putting this on, because this is awesome.
Well, great. Brett, that's a wonderful story. And that's applicable to the 124s, the 129s, and the 107s with that variety of transmission. So I hadn't even thought of that. That's great.
You bet.
We have a question from Melbourne Kim. Let me call on, see what that is. Melbourne Kim question.
Hi, Gary. Thank you all for putting this on. I'm also from the Dallas area, and I'm familiar with Brett's challenges with that 107. You had mentioned earlier something about the oil transfer tubes on the 129s. Can you elaborate a little more on that? Because some of them are plastic, some of them are other materials, and how they degrade or are broken through the oil filler cap and fall into the engine and cause other issues?
Well, I don't know much about that one. I've done that on the 107. I know on the 129, the M119 engine, you have the issue with the plastic caps, but it doesn't cause the same type of catastrophic disaster that it does on the M117 engine. Does anyone else have some more knowledge on that they'd like to share? Wish Danny was still with us. I mean, I've got 3 M119 engine cars, and I really haven't worried very much about that on that engine. 117 engine is one where you really have to worry about that.
I'm familiar of several folks who have gone through the process of replacing those, and they've been very careful to replace them with the aluminum ones. But what I gather from their descriptions are that they were being impacted when they put the oil filler tube in there, with the old style. When you poke the metal filler top to the old cans and the other ways, and you put the funnels in there, you can break 1 or 2 of those, and they transfer the oil across the cam on the top, is my understanding. So I just wondered if that happened before, and something worth avoiding if possible.
I'm glad you offered that. I had not heard of that. Anybody else want to elaborate on that one? Okay, good. Thank you for that. I'll go look right now.
One more thing, just kind of a plug for our section. We have relationships with our dealerships here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area where we do our tech sessions. And our technical sessions allow us to, or they are so kind to allow us to put our cars on their lifts for about 4 hours on a Saturday morning every quarter. And we rotate through all the dealerships and we buy our parts there. And we have probably, as past technical director for our section, we probably have about 70 or 80 members who, that's the only time we ever see them, is when they're coming to those tech sessions to plug up to the SDS or to do inspections on the lifts under the car. And we just can't say enough about it. And our good partners at Park Place and MB Plano and some of our independent dealers like Loudon's here. So I'm not plugging them specifically, but I'm just saying what a wonderful traction. And I first started doing this over 20 years ago with our section because they had that available. Plus our discounts on the parts and the availability that when you get into something that you're working within that 4 hour or 3 hour time slot, that you've got access to other parts that you may break when you're going through one of these older cars. So you can always fix those too.
Great, thanks. And that we'll try to harvest that one once we are out of our social distancing thing.
Did I understand him correctly to say they gave him access to the STAR system? I know the older cars don't have that, but was that what he was saying?
Yes, we plug them up and run the full diagnostic. You can run the long one or the short one and clear your codes and rerun it again and see what reoccurs.
Do they have a tech guy that helps you with that, or do you just have the knowledge yourself to somebody in the club to run the system?
Our method, and we've written some rules for the tech sessions, are that you do your own work with your own tools on your own car, and but we have techs that are there available for consultation. They're not supposed to turn tools, but they will look over your shoulder and show you how to plug it up and how to run the program. So it only takes one or two of those, and then another member, we can all help each other, and so it works real well.
Great, thank you.
It might be worthwhile if we could get a copy or trade some of your tech rules. I understand the service departments are still open because that's an essential function, but some of the sales portions of the dealerships are closed in different states.
I have a question in chat here. Are R129 schematics available for bugging out the RF circuit? And we're talking about key fobs here. Does anybody know of a knowledge to be able to go back and fix those? I mean, I see discussion like that on the internet periodically, but I haven't really seen an answer to it. Okay, I'm not sure there's a good answer to that one. Jack has his hand up. Jack, what's your question? Go ahead and unmute. I see you talking, but you're still muted, Jack.
Here, I can unmute him. Here, I'll unmute him. Go ahead, Jack.
Okay, Jack, you're unmuted.
Okay, thank you. So I have an 89 European model 500 SL, which I purchased from new before I came to the US. But my question, and that's a 107, obviously. They didn't make 560 SLs anywhere else other than the US, as you guys know. But my question is for my 2004 SL 600, the plastic on the display unit is totally deteriorated. And I've been told you have to replace the whole unit, and there's got to be some other method because to replace the unit is very expensive, and an 04 SL 600 is only worth maybe 25,000. That's all it's worth. So Gary, yes, I love my V12, no question about that. Anybody have any ideas?
Man, I would be looking on eBay for a used part that didn't have the problem at a reduced price from what the dealer wants to charge you for that. But Yeah, I mean, SL600s are rare even in the 230 chassis, so that might be a challenge. I'm not sure if that's shared with the 500 version of that car.
It is, so it would be the same for the 500 as well.
Yeah, I'd look on eBay then and see what you could find.
Okay, anybody else? Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jack. Okay, any more hands up? No more hands raised.
Hey, Gary, this is Dean.
Hey, Dean.
Hey, I found my note real quick just to throw this out. There was a lot of discussion around keys. What Mercedes told me on the keys was it was where they're not available, 97 to 99 S class, 98 to 2005 M class, and 90 to 98 SL class. Now that came from the Classic Center. I don't know if it's exactly true for all the years, but that's what they told me. They did not have a key supply for, and that was 18 months ago or something.
Yeah, that's kind of consistent with that question I got on the phone about keys, the person that had the 97 key fob.
We got one more question here, Gary. Let's see here. We've got, where is the ODB connector located in a 99 129?
Yeah, the OBD2 connectors are required to be accessible essentially from the driver's seat. So look under the driver's, look under the panel under the dashboard, under the instrument cluster, and 99 should be on the right. There's a little cover over it, kind of sticks down, and when you're plugged into it, it's going to be kind of where your knee is if your knee had been on the gas pedal. And one of the interesting pieces of Mercedes is that they converted to the OBD2 plug very early. I found my 94 SL320 actually has an OBD2 plug under the instrument cluster there as well, which really surprised me. Any other questions? Okay, let me do a little advertisement then. You know, for our events, we are going to have a few other things by video. Our rally master, Jim Pachetti, is going to do our part 1 TSD rally training session by video on Saturday morning, May 9th. And he's also going to put together a training rally that we can do at our own timing sometime before the next Sunday. And then that Sunday evening, we'll have a video session to go over our results on the training rally. And we'll do that using an app on our phones, so there'll be no checkpoints, there will be checkpoints, there'll be no checkpoint workers, and there'll be no touching of anybody, so we'll maintain social distancing. And so that's accelerating our rally training we were going to do a little bit later. We're going to do an in-person karting event on June 13th at Lanier Raceplex. The place has the best rental karts I have ever driven. We have a minimum of 10 people to make that event go. We've only got 2 people signed up right now. That's me and my wife. So I encourage you, if you're anywhere near Brazelton, Georgia, on the 13th of June, to sign up for that one. That's directly across from Road Atlanta, so it's not hard to find. We'll do 4 sessions on the track and then have some lunch. We're doing a photography training session at the Augusta Mercedes dealer on June 20th, and we're going to try to video that one as well and do it by VTC to reach out for other folks. And we're having a concourse judging school at Bud's Benz in Douglasville, Georgia on the 27th of June. We may do another tech talk here if we're still social distancing in a couple weeks. I might try to put something together for May 2nd. And of course, don't forget the event that really made us do this, the R107, R129 gathering that we've now scheduled for the 12th of September in Lincolnton at the Lincoln County Historical Park in Georgia. We'd love to see you there too. Join our Facebook group if you want to follow what we're doing. Just it's Peachtree, what was it, Peachtree MBCA. Ruben, what's its title?
MBCA Peachtree. I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep. Everybody's welcome. Everybody's welcome to join that Facebook group.
Yeah, be a follower, and you'll see our stuff. And you're welcome to any of the video stuff or anything you want to drive to. It's worth the drive. At least we'll try to make it worth the drive.
Yeah. All of our events are also listed on our website. So continue to, for those of you that don't get our newsletter and don't get our announcement via constant contact. That's another place to keep up with us.
Okay. Joe or Doug, you have anything you want to add?
Just
Not
want
a
to
thing.
thank
I think this is-
all
I'm
the
really pleased
speakers
that
and
we had so many
presenters.
people show up, and I think this was a great session.
Great. Thanks for joining us, Doug.
Makes
Joe,
me
you
want
were-
to have another R129.
Me too.
All I got to do is give it to Cameron. We need 3 cars.
Thanks,
Good luck.
everybody from Texas.
Okay. Joe, did you want, you were in, and Doug were talking at the same time. Joe, do you want to go ahead and say that again?
Just wanted to thank everybody that worked to put this together, speakers and everybody. And anybody that's still on, I see we still have 43 people. We're hoping to do even our live events that Gary was talking about, maybe even the judging school on a video like this. So hopefully keep following us somewhere and join us. Thank you.
All right. I guess we'll end the meeting now and thank everyone for attending. It's been fun. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.